Let's get this party started. Super excited for this session by Garrett Green, who is right here from DFW area over on the east side, closer to Dallas. Garrett Green, I'll let him tell you all about his story and things like that, but let's do a big, belong round of applause for your brother, Garrett Green. Come on, buddy. Quicker.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Whew. Up here on stage. So, title, Blessed Are the Meek, How Choosing Humility Over Humiliation Leads to a Better Life with Autism. Garrett, I have autism. What's it feel like to try to have relationships? To me, well, it feels a bit like this shirt. Bit like pulling a door in every conversation I come across, but quite a few of them are actually push doors. Let's see. All right, so I told Marty to give me up to an hour to teach the people in this room how to socialize with others. There's a lot to go over, but I'm going to tell you the main things you need to know from my point of view. If you learn anything, it's three things. Ask questions. It sounds so simple, but asking questions will get answers. Oh, just trying to get you a little closer. A little bit closer? Sorry. Thought I was projecting my voice plenty. It sounds so simple, but asking questions will get answers from anyone who wants to give them. People care when we care about them. When all is said and done, Christ is still the way to live, whether we are on the spectrum or not. So I wouldn't call this lesson science, theology, more really a mishmash of everything. I'm only 27 years old, 4 years a disciple, don't have a PhD or finished my master's. While I've done research, I am the last thing you would call an expert. If someone more learned tells you something I quoted or cited in the wrong context, that's on me. Let's see. So, relationships are much harder when you have autism, understatement, even what some might call high functioning. First, we go through my story, then big three of how to get along with other people, a few school tips, talking about some bread, science, learning, shame, vulnerability, and then a recent real-life example to pull things together. So I think this verse makes for a pretty good summary of my life until this point. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. My name is Garrett Green, and I'm a little bit like most people in this room. Loved by God, not so much by the world. Loving people and wanting to connect, but finding myself hitting a lot of roadblocks. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at 3 years old. Could have been smart, maybe. Some think I was nonverbal, something I was, but bottom line, I didn't understand people. The early years are kind of a haze to me, but I know the facts, or at least some. I was physically and verbally abused by my father, more than my brother. I'm not sure why, but I imagine it had to do something with not being able to listen or understand him. CPS got involved and threatened to take us away from them. So my parents divorced when I was 6. At age 7, I also picked up an ADHD diagnosis. For as long as I can remember, I've fought against the gut feeling that I was less than everyone else. My mom told me for my whole life that I fought really hard to be looked at like I was normal. But a couple decades changed things. Middle and high school weren't great. I could easily reenact so many scenes of me making a fool of myself because I didn't understand how the world worked. Lots of mocking laughter, weird looks, or disgust. My father and I were rebuilding a relationship in his custody time, around ages 7 to 16. Though I could tell you I closed myself off more and more and more. I tried studying the Bible twice by the time I started college, but I just wasn't getting it. Why did everyone around me seem to know how to talk or to act? I just wasn't getting something. 17 years old, I tell my mom I'm having thoughts of taking my own life. I didn't want to die. I knew God wouldn't want me to commit suicide, but I couldn't think of a better way to stop the pain of feeling worthless. So she brought me to see Dr. Morris, who would be my therapist for 8 years. Things got better, but it took time. When I was about to head to college, I saw a book on Dad's shelf. That's the actual picture of the book as it is today, and asked if I could borrow it. I still haven't given it back, but I did what the book said, somewhat, and made 3 friends on day 1 in college. How to win friends and influence people. I won't go everything because copyright issues. Let's see. I did a lot of what the book said, but I wasn't doing it with the right heart. A lot of success and failure later become to 2021. I started getting better with people, but there was something missing. I made a good few friends in the world, some real friends, but there was still hurt. There was still lots of hurt. I was better at socializing on surface levels, good at initiating relationships. Started getting better with my words, but I still believed I wasn't good enough to be loved. I turned to manipulation. I got good enough at socializing, figuring out what words to say to make others like me. There was still lashing out at people. It was still anger, turning to sexting, fantasies, and role-playing in one form or another almost every day of the week while in college. I just wanted to escape. I was going through the motions when it came to school, attending church less and less, and distancing myself from the world, distancing from the people in my life, my dad included. I thought I could have a better relationship in any world where I was more attractive or powerful or good with my words than I was. I thought I could be more happy in any world where I wasn't me. And it worked, sort of. I was in the in crowd, quote unquote, among my friends from around the world, online. It tasted good for a little while, really good. At one point, I tried something similar in our church. I decided to confess a sexual sin, like I might be with any of these groups. After all, I felt like I'd come to know people outside the church cared for me more than the people inside it. Let me repeat that. I felt like the people I'd come to know outside the church, outside our church, loved me more than the people inside it. The reactions to my attempts at vulnerability were mixed at best. There's about 8 people in that call. One person, who I still called a friend, today reciprocated, and he confessed to going too far in a fight and accidentally taking someone's life. And yet I felt the distance instantly from the others. People who rejected me more than someone who had taken another's life. Some retreated, and I turned even more to my vices in shame. I think maybe deep down, some part of me already knew I wasn't welcome. Around that time, late 2021, I found the campus ministry under Eddie and Joanna Blandon. Fantastic. I saw what love one another meant in this community, and I saw a different spark in relationships. I was still neck deep in sin and in shame. I tried going through the studies a third time, thinking, okay, let's try it one more time. With Eddie Blandon and Aiden Gober, hope you're watching, I was seeing real righteousness in how we were treated in that ministry, even if it would be glimpses. Eddie told me how special I was to God, by reading 1 Corinthians 12:26 through 28. Concerning spiritual gifts. Now, if the foot should say, "Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body," and if it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, "Because I am not an eye, I don't belong to the body," it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? And so, as it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, "I don't need you," and the head cannot say to the feet, "I don't need you." On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. And then Eddie said, "Look back at verse 22, Garrett. That's what God thinks of you. You are indispensable." I cried on the spot. I wept, sobbing, ugly crying. From that moment forward, I wanted to love people God's way. I was baptized May 8th, 2022. Some things stayed the same, but some things changed. I was still a reckless, confused young man. But I had ground to stand on. I had God, and whenever I trusted in Him and did what He said, things seemed to go better or feel better than normal. I made truer friendships, but there was still something missing. It was a double life for the first year. 2023, I was trying my third or fourth medication, trying to fix some mental issues, especially bipolar. There were struggles, but one of the biggest was trying to still love my dad. I was still bitter. My brother asked me if I even cared about Dad or if I loved him. Later that year, I had gone through some counseling courses over domestic violence and bullying. Shame, shame, and more shame tended to be the ones that leaded to those things. The courses taught me that the people who hurt me were just as broken as I was. Somewhere between turning 23 and 26, something was different. There's a quiet confidence, a peace inside me that I couldn't understand where it came from. But I think most of you know the answer to that. Relationships grew. Mother, brother, father. God gave me more relationships than I can keep up with. And I mean that I can't keep up with them. I don't have enough time for everyone I'm friends with. On top of that, He let me meet and date his beloved daughter, Crystal Washington. And when I looked back, there were 3 factors that always led to better relationships. The big 3: humility, patience, and meekness. Why aren't all these in the title? I'm going to be humble and say that they weren't actually in the outline I sent Marty a couple months ago. About 2,000 years ago, Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount. Some of the words go as follows: "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because that is your reward, and because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The Greek word translated meek is pleis, refers to mildness, gentleness of spirit, or humility. Other forms of this Greek word are used elsewhere in the New Testament, including James 1:19, James 3:13. Meekness is a humility towards God and towards others. Meekness is having the power to do something, but refraining for the benefit of someone else. Paul urged meekness when he told us to live a life worthy of the calling that we have received, or you have received in the actual verse. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Those last three. Ephesians 4:1-12, or 1 through 2. So, Garrett, why do you have all those weird color coding highlights? You'll see them throughout, with blue being humility, yellow being patience, and green being meekness. So, what is it to be meek? It's to be quiet, to have restraint in an interaction with another person, to be gentle, to be righteous, to treat them rightly, to be obedient, to withhold the power or right, quote unquote, you would otherwise have. Humility, you acknowledge your flaws and limits. You refrain from boasting. Patience, you endure in this relationship. You remain steadfast. You don't give up. So, going back, we see that these qualities are throughout the sermon. Blessed are the poor in spirit meaning humility, understanding that you have your flaws. Blessed are the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, etc., etc. So, last year, I had the opportunity to counsel a younger kid who had autism. He was about to enter public school after being homeschooled a while, and his parents asked me to give him some advice. I said, okay, I think I have a few tips. To survive public school, what I told him came down to 3 core things. 1, become genuinely interested in people. 2, become kind to the teachers as much as you can, for they will help you out in turn, especially against the bullies, but also when you struggle with assignments. He asked me, how do I avoid gossip? Can I do that? And I said, no. No. People will gossip and talk about you no matter what. But act with integrity, and they won't have anything to talk about. All it'll be is lies. So these come back to humility, patience, and meekness. So in initiating, it's actually a little bit up to us. Matthew 7, verse 7 through 12. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Sounds simple. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, you give him a snake? Not very pleasant. If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others as you would have them to do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Exactly. So the equation works like this. Do to others as you would have them to do, for this sums up the law and the prophets. I want to be loved. I want people to be interested in me. I want them to remember who I am, and so on and so forth. Do you guys want that? Yeah. So do that to others. That's a simple equation, but it gets complicated in the execution. So I actually do recommend the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, for anyone who has autism and some who don't. It was very useful for me seeing a lot of examples on these concepts, on ways I could execute these strategies it's talking about. So step one, be genuinely interested in others. This is the root of how to make people like you. Will you like me if I like you? In a healthy admiration and not a creepy way. I'll use I statements on stage, but what if I'm talking me in every conversation? That's not pleasant. Find that a lot of times my relationship with God is very hard when I forget He cares about me and who I am. It's also very hard when I'm uninterested in Him. Show enthusiasm when you meet people. Smile. This is actually crazy useful. Sincere smiles are not just great for you, they're great for others. The brain experiences what's called a social reward response when we see someone smiling. It's a release of dopamine, like the same pleasure you would get out of eating a good meal. And even if you're on the phone, people can hear you smile. So, remember other people's names. Your name, your identity, is one of the most important sounds you can hear. There's actually a psychology term called the cocktail party effect, where normally we have these different variations in our attention, but something that psychology hasn't been able to explain is why, if you're in a party having a bunch of conversations and you hear someone across the room say your name, your attention suddenly goes to that. Suddenly goes to your name, even when there's all these other distractors. It's intrinsic to you. Learn how to pronounce people's names. So quick note, I'm both white and Texan, if you couldn't tell. Some strangers, especially those of East or South Asian descent, don't expect me to know how to pronounce their names. Now, while I don't remember his name exactly, as it was about 2 years ago, I remember the name of a Walmart worker down the street from me, an Arab guy. When you're in Texas, people expect you to be polite. Sorry, excuse me, how are you? Have a good day, and all of that. So I read this guy's name tag and say, have a good day, Arman. It's been at least 2 years. And I can still remember the look of shock on his face as he said, you pronounced it right. Nobody does that. I got the same reaction 2 months ago, only a little bit funnier. A guy at the front desk of a conference, passing out badges to us, things like that. I squinted at his name tag, and he holds out his hands. Just Kim is fine. Well, I've got a finger up like this. Kim Yong, I say. And look at his face. Same look. Learn how to pronounce people's names. Try to remember your classmates' names. Write them down. Write what you hear them talk about, or text yourself a note, whatever you need to do. Make the other person feel important. You can do this with the other parts, but key thing, give compliments. Sincere compliments are crazy strong at building confidence. When my classes studied on feeling rewards, we can experience what's called a vicarious reward, which is feeling good when others feel good. When we give compliments, we actually increase our confidence. Isn't that strange? That's almost like God hardwired us that way. Giving compliments and then hearing that, oh, thank you, can instantly improve my day. When you meet someone, find, what can I honestly admire about this person? Talk in terms of the other person's interests. We want people, as autistic people, we love them talking about our interests. I went to a wedding recently with Crystal. She's the youngest of her friend group. I'm younger than her, so you have this 27-year-old in a group of people in their 30s, all millennials or Gen X. How did I get along? I talked in millennial interests. Older movies like Matrix, Terminator, or artists like Johnny Cash. Things like VHS, various analog technology. I talked about their adult topics, asked about finances or business. They loved me. Being humble. Let's see. Listen. That's the other important thing. This one takes a lot of practice, which is why I have it last. But listening means to focus on what the other person is saying rather than just what I want to say. I want people to listen what I want to say. Why not do the same? If I'm thinking of anything, it's going to be a follow-up question. I've heard going 4 questions deep is a pretty good policy. But all of this to say, to start relationships, we have to be willing to give first. There's even a business concept called the law of reciprocation. Others will care when we care about them, and we show it. Can I get a show of hands here? Who makes a script before going to a party or writing some notes down? I see a couple hands, a few hands here. Who here in the room is a genius? Awesome, cool. So even geniuses need advice, and so do we. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Speaking of, go and ask God for advice. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generally to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Now, I'm not saying God's going to instantly pop it into your brain, because God works through a lot of avenues. I've had moments of insight from therapists, parents, friends, books. God does give us everything we need to succeed. But one of his most effective teachers, practice tests. You would be surprised to learn that slow learning can be a lot better than fast learning. Why? According to the APA Dictionary of Psychology, something called the testing effect is that taking a test on any previously studied material leads to a better retention, memory of it, than does restudying of that information for an equivalent amount of time. What? That doesn't make sense. So right now, by making scripts, me giving you advice, we're studying for these tests of the world out there. But no matter how many books we read, any advice is useless if we don't put it into practice. If it takes more time to learn, good. The folk wisdom I hear repeatedly about expertise is that you aren't a master in something until you put about 10,000 hours into it. Let's look where the testing effect was described in an experiment. So you have 2 groups. Students looked over these prose passages, basically those assignments in English where you're asked about what was said in this speech or paper or article or whatever. Group 1, students studied 2 separate times, then took a test. Group 2, students studied, took a practice test later, then took the test. The light gray is the study test group. Initially, you have normal double study group performing better, but over time, who retains more? The second experiment they did, where there were people only studying for the test, then studying with 1 test before the final, so study, 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 test, or 1 study session and then 3 test sessions before the final exam. Over time, after 1 week, the ones who were repeatedly tested over and over had the best memory. Our memory becomes sharper when it's challenged. Each test that God allows us to go through is a way to grow stronger. Let's see. I have a lot of trouble with starting to try to initiate. I developed a lot of social anxiety from my high school misadventures and belief of, I can't do it in a lot of areas. But here's a great visual my counselor showed me. Applies to almost any project you can think of. You just make it exist first. You can make it good later. Just make a relationship exist first. You can make it good later. Isn't that the kind of thing we're taught as disciples with God? Why is it hard to start, to continue something? Shame. I think God's favorite kind of humor is irony. For a really long time, I always thought I was terrible at science. First, I got a bachelor's of science in psychology, but that's not real science, I told myself. When I applied to UTD, the people reviewing them said, "Hey, this kid almost flunked out of environmental science. Let's accept him into the neuroscience program." Haha, thank you, God. Last year, one of the courses was a seminar on emotions. Yep, just emotions in general. One of the fun things I learned was how the course describes shame. Shame is a social emotion, distinct from guilt or fear. Guilt says, I did something bad. This is good for us. This is healthy. Helps us adjust to society better. Shame says, I am something bad. Shame is the hiding emotion, wanting attention to not be on oneself. So here's a quote from probably my favorite animated film, Kung Fu Panda, one that really resonated with me. My mom told me I fought really hard just to be looked like I was normal. He said, yeah, I stayed. I stayed because every time you threw a brick at my head or said I smelled, it hurt, but it could never hurt more than it did just every day of my life just being me. In this movie, Poe tries hard to be himself. He hates being clumsy, overweight, embarrassed of his hobbies, his habits, and his job at his dad's noodle shop. So Poe stays in a place where his master is abusive to him, hoping that enduring could make Poe into someone he doesn't hate. There's more that shame can do, but here are a couple of examples, more than a couple, from my own life. I would try to prove I'm competent at something, and usually hurt or embarrass myself in the process. I could lie or cheat to prove I'm smart. I have to prove I'm smart, because people tell me I am. I would turn to video games, pornography, or just straight up sleeping tons of hours so I didn't have to be awake, so it would numb the feeling. I would join in putting other people down, bullying, pranks, etc. I would chase success, relationships with noteworthy people, or publicity just like this. I would endure toxic relationships because I thought I would never be good enough for anything sincere, that I shouldn't ask for better. I'm worthless. I would hide my spiritual struggles like purity or laziness. They saw my problems, they wouldn't want anything to do with me. Most of all, I would try to hide who I was, what I liked, what hurt me, who I was. I put on a mask, taking on a totally different behavior depending on who I was around. The last one is pretty common in autism, but not exclusive to it. What is this? It's masking. At UTD, I had the opportunity to look into masking, or social camouflage, where we, autists, hide the autism. But this isn't exclusive to autism. Neurotypicals can do this as well. Choose to imitate the speech patterns of someone you like. Even the cadence. I could get that down pretty well. Forcing eye contact. Adopting different social roles, masks. It's mimicry. Anyone can put a mask on in a relationship. Put on a face that they think the other party wants to see. You can do this in marriage, or completely outside, nobody knows where you are. But the specific collection of masks you see here usually happens with autism. Secret identities are fun to watch, but not so fun to live. Much like secret identities, they come out eventually. The mask has to come off. Well, the study cited here focuses on some differences between boys and girls with autism. Its background sections provided a pretty clear picture of what the consequences of social camouflage look like. Masking can help initially. Studies I looked into showed that people who use a lot of social camouflage have better chances at getting friends and even employment. People who didn't mask were more likely to get rejected from interviews. But if you look at this on the right, we see that hiding who we are only goes so far. On the right of this chart is the normal way of doing things. We fidget, avoid looking at the other person, get in the personal bubble, don't make any facial expressions, and suddenly people think we're weird. On the left is the masking way of doing things. We look for and try to pick up what others are doing, then we do that. But of course, we get tired. We can't keep a fake identity. Statistics will show that holding up this mask leads to extreme anxiety, cognitive fatigue, depression, and higher risk of suicide. Both of these can lead to shame, and I've done both. So what do I do? Am I stuck? Do I have any options? No. Here's another study on camouflage. They interviewed nearly 280 individuals with autism. Almost universally, people who had autism found that social camouflage didn't bring them joy, it just avoided pain. It was a survival measure. Almost universally, people found relief when they were genuine and found genuine acceptance. When we don't need to hide, we can have a humble courage, this vulnerability that changes lives. Vulnerability is the culmination of everything I've talked about here. To be vulnerable is to be transparent with emotions, to acknowledge limits with humility, show meekness by refraining from putting up emotional walls. And it's a very enduring and patient thing to remain with someone when you're completely wide open. It is to show another how I feel without lashing out at them. It is opening myself up for an attack, but more importantly, it opens up for comfort, for relationship. So what does it look like when we're open? Statements over my life have started changing, or changed completely. I became relatable with my weaknesses. How was I going to learn if I didn't get help, if I didn't ask? When I was humble and saw what shame did to me, I could empathize even with the people who hurt others, people who hid their weaknesses and pain by inflicting it on other people. I didn't need to endure abuse to be loved, but I am commanded to love even those who hate me. Hiding was not what allowed me to have great relationships. It's what kept me from having them. Defensiveness. So, what does the hiding look like? Defensiveness is the overwhelming urge to protect yourself when you feel hurt, shame, sadness, or anger from someone. Instead of being open to self-reflection and having a healthy dialogue, you snap back. You're making a snarky remark, haha. Give someone the silent treatment or be critical in return. Here are some 2 ways we can talk to people who hurt us by something they said. When I repeat something I heard from you, facts only, then give my perspective first, that gives a chance for you to do the same. A little warning, not everyone will open up. The response, "I'm sorry you feel that way," is a super frustrating wall. Communication is a 2-way street, but we want to do our part. I heard a pretty good quote recently that didn't make it into the slides. People aren't shamed into changing. They're loved into changing. So how do we handle conflicts? Firstly, you show respect. You don't just say you're wrong. When we criticize, those walls shouldn't surprise. It's very important to start off neutral or even positive. Don't start with accusations, complaints, or how they're wrong. Some people get suspicious when you start with a compliment. So how can we settle this suspicion? We can ask questions. Questions are one of our strongest weapons. I didn't get what you said when you meant. I didn't get what you meant when you said this. Can you help me? That implies I am interested in what you had to say. I want to understand you. I don't follow. Is there a different way you can word that? I didn't understand, but I want to. What did you mean when you said this? What you said was important to me, and I want to know more. Importantly, avoid the word but. Haha. Let me show you. Hey, customer service person, you said you have this on the policy, but I didn't get that benefit this month. So in that, we add criticism, condemning, and complaining, and a but all in one bad batch. Let's try something without any of that. Hello, is this customer service? Thank you, Marty. I was having some trouble this month, and I thought I qualified for a benefit in Section 15B of the contract. Would you be able to help me figure this out? That's humility. I'm admitting my issue. I'm having meekness, restraining from an accusation, and patience by gently giving them the reins of the conversation. The questions like, would you be able to? Or can you? It's a neat little trick. It gives an expectation of competence that the other party can meet. It says, I believe you're capable enough to help me. Prove me right. Begin arguments in a friendly way. When you can, food. Food can actually be a great start for an argument. It's funny. Why? So in neuroanatomy, neuroscience, we learned something about something called the orexigenic system, opposite of anorexics, in the brain's hypothalamus. In English, this circuit starting in the brain tells you I'm hungry, but also I'm irritated. Hangry is an actual biological thing in our brains. When you feed someone, you're shutting this system down. My professor who taught me this says that whenever she needs to talk with her husband, she'll make him a meal first. Works like a charm, especially with guys. Learn the art of apologies. What do I do when I'm in the wrong? People can't read us. We can't read people. So how do we make sure it seems like we're sincere? Start with an I'm sorry. No excuses, no rationalizations. For a lot of casual acquaintances, just these 2 words can be fine. I'm sorry. What we want out of an apology is sincerity. So that's what we need to aim for when we do it ourselves. Humility, highlighting in blue, is at the core of this. We acknowledge what we did wrong. Start with the action, just the action. I'm sorry. I made a commitment when I was not able to follow through on it. I made a promise, and I broke it. Second, add some insight. What thinking led you to the mistake? I was only looking out for myself. Third, think how they might feel if you were in their shoes. In doing this, I hurt your trust. Then ask for forgiveness. Avoid the statement, it won't happen again. Avoid the statement, it won't happen again, because if or when it does happen again, now you've broken their trust twice over. Fourth, repent. You're demonstrating that you know what you did wrong and how it affects the other person, and now they're more likely to trust that it won't happen again. But important to apologies is love. A few years ago, before I was a disciple, I pulled my dad into a session with my therapist. It wasn't a very good meeting to me at the time. I wanted to get him to admit what he did to me, to take responsibility for hurting me. The only one who had told me the abuse ever happened was Mom. It didn't work out. Meeting didn't work. And for the longest time, I pridefully labeled him as defensive, stubborn, and unable to admit any faults. It hurt my relationship with him badly. After I was a disciple, I recalled the first command with a promise. Honor your father and mother, and it will go well with you. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the humble one, and turns out the right one. I decided I would reinitiate contact with him. Not because I wanted to. No, around that time, Jordan had asked me if I wanted anything to do with him. I said, I think it's what Jesus would want to do. So in 2023, I started reaching out to Dad, seeing when we could have lunch and talk. It felt different, talking to him as another adult. Nowadays, Dad initiates more than me, because grad school tends to make you busy. We have lunch on Fridays, once every month or 2 months. So I didn't love my dad for a brief period of time, but I put my trust in God, decided I would try being patient, trusted in saying that if I honored Dad when he hadn't honored me, God would somehow make things better. I underestimated God. I underestimated love. If I speak in tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, this is 1 Corinthians 13, by the way, and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give my bodies to the flames that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Patience is the word used to describe love first. What is patience? The word here, agape makrothrume, it's a mouthful, is actually a Greek verb. It's not an adjective like we might think. Love is patient. It's a verb meaning is long-suffering or forbears. Love forbears. In literal, it combines makros, long, thumos, anger. It means the action of being long-tempered. But 1 Corinthians 13 doesn't end there. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now, we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now, I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So we can compare. Paul shows us the things that people look at, the things that world thinks makes good relationships, don't last. Prophecies were a gift of the Spirit, being impressive to others, standing out with unique gifts. This will pass away. Tongues were a gift of the Spirit, He was speaking the language of angels. Speaking well helped me make some friends, but it isn't what let me keep them. We want to be smart. I want to be smart, to be looked at like I was normal. But being smart was not what made me friends, nor what let me keep them. All of these things would disappear and pass away. Paul finishes this chapter by saying there will be three things that outlast everything: faith, hope, and love. It requires patience. Hope requires patience. Love requires patience. But the greatest of them is love. Up here, only a few of things that God gives us when we're humble, when we're patient, we're meek. Recently, God gave me peace. Remember when I said I underestimated God? I had a conversation with Dad a few weeks ago. I told him I was afraid of being a parent. Not that I'm having kids in the near future. That I wouldn't do very good. I wasn't good at taking care of our family dog, and I neglected her a lot. I mistreated her. And I would not call myself patient, gentle, or putting her needs before my wants. She passed away at the beginning of 2023. I looked at her like she was an inconvenience. I feared my parenting would go the same way. I went on to tell Dad that for a long time, very long time, I felt I was inherently more selfish than the people around me. Because I couldn't tell what they were thinking, so I didn't care. That I was morally corrupt and irredeemable. That I wouldn't really get better. So we had a talk about parenting. He talked about his relationship with his father, talks he'd had with his counselor, and some group therapy he'd gone to. Dad told me he had been impatient with me when I was young. Threat of shame around him in the church. They expected everyone to be awesome back then. If you weren't awesome, what were you? The threat of shame led to violent overreaction to what he described as kids being kids. We were just kids. I talked with him how domestic violence starts with a lot of shame, and he told me he had hurt me. He told me how he had hurt me. He had put an unrealistic expectation on me to act like an adult when I was still a kid. I had put unrealistic expectations on myself as a result, and it turned into shame. I don't know how often Dad went to God for help. I didn't ask during that conversation. Both Dad and I had gone to therapists, counselors, and God after he divorced my mom. They had the divorce. Dad learned to be more gentle with me over time, meek, humble, and patiently waited for the relationship to heal. I learned to be more humble and patient with him. Domestic abuse ruins a lot of relationships, and it did ruin ours. We were both humiliated, our relationship shadowed by shame for 2 decades. When I was humble and vulnerable with my struggles with Dad, and when he did the same, neither of us lashed at the other. We were meek, gentle with each other, giving up that guardedness that's common in a lot of these situations. When we imitated these qualities of Christ, and we were patient with God, trusting him and trusting each other, God built a bridge. I could look up a dozen articles, dozen strategies, life hacks, and what have you. I could give so many of them to you guys here in this conference. A few of them could work. Some of them did for me. But if there's one line I can draw through every good relationship I have, it's this one. Whether I have autism or not, it doesn't change the fact that Christ is the way, truth, and the life. Thank you. Now, do we have time for Q&A? Okay. Q. 5 minutes? Okay. So, quick fire, 5-minute Q&A, I guess. Yes, I can repeat the question. Yes. Okay.
Hold it right up.
So you mentioned that you were having suicidal thoughts as a kid. So what kind of helped you overcome those thoughts?
Let's see. What helped me overcome? I think it was partially that I wanted to commit suicide, but I was too afraid of the pain of it. It's possible that I could have, but much more recently, when those thoughts come, it's remembering that my life is worth it, that I am worth it, that I and you are indispensable.
That answers my question.
Thank you.
You mentioned how you can either come out right and show your autism when you're trying to make a relationship, or to mask it and eventually get to the point where you tell them. At what point did you tell your girlfriend right off the bat that you have autism? Or did you get a few dates in and then tell her?
From the outset, I think. First date.
First date? That's impressive.
Yeah. I would say,
Were you nervous about it?
no, I wouldn't say so. I think that's probably because since, I've had a bit of time to come to terms with vulnerability and be used to being open about my autism. It takes time. Again, practice. You're not gonna get success instantly. I can definitely tell you with relationships, I was rejected 20 times before I even graduated high school. 20 different girls. And a few of them were bullied out of accepting those dates.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, Garrett, so you and I seem to have a bit of a similar spiritual journey. I know you were in my studies, but I'm just curious, because you said you studied the Bible like 2 or 3 times before you finally made the decision. What do you think was different compared to the previous studies, compared to the one that had you make the decision?
I understood grace. I didn't really understand, because in high school, my mind was still spinning day after day after day with those high expectations. That I didn't meet these high expectations. I didn't have the zeal I saw in everyone else. I didn't have this fire. It was just kind of quiet. I'm getting this wrong, I thought. So I didn't see myself getting it like everyone else. Everyone else seemed to get it with a relationship with a God. But then it was the case of, I can make it exist first. I can make it good later. Oh, okay.
About the masking, what was the process of learning how to unmask? Because I believe many, such as myself, could empathize with it being automatic, and I can't really tell when it's on or off because I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. I think part of it is when you are opening up to people about your autism and they're not judging you for it, it becomes much more natural because your brain instinctively sees, oh, they're not treating me with judgment. I can fidget, it's okay. They're not really minding it too much. it was mostly a subconscious process for me. And while might not be the same for others, in some periods I would catch myself, oh, I'm doing this autistic thing. No, I don't need to stop doing that. It was like stopping the stopping. It was taking the brakes off, which is not safe on the road. It's safe with autism. One more question?
I guess what I'm wondering, I know Jesus talks about it a lot. I wonder if you'd be willing to talk about forgiveness in the context of, I guess, autism, right? I found it very useful and inspiring, your thought about make it exist and then make it good. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that could apply to forgiveness, and if you'd be willing to share something about, like, I thought it was inspiring. You said it was only a few weeks ago with your dad. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about the difference between you had a forgiveness enough to get baptized, to have a legitimate Holy Spirit enter you, but yet it stands to reason there was a difference between a few weeks ago and then even in the future. Like, wonder if you'd be willing to share anything about how you process that, maybe even from an autistic perspective.
I guess from the standpoint of, I don't know if I understood the question. Could you repeat that one more time? Yeah, I didn't understand.
Just
quite.
if you'd be willing to share anything about forgiveness from an autistic perspective, especially as it relates to make it exist and make it good, or then reprocessing something later.
Yeah.
Like is there such a thing as, good enough, but then you still, or like even with your dad, do you sometimes still feel tempted to see things from a worldly point of view, or to see things from a painful point of view, things like that?
Yeah, so 2 parts to this, I guess. So we dive into theology, I guess, temporarily. We have baptism as part of our salvation, and then our process of heading towards God by changing our behavior, that's sanctification. We believe his son died, was buried, rose from the dead 3 days later, and we're baptized and repenting. Repent, then be baptized. And that's the process of salvation. So sanctification is everything that comes after that. But how Eddie explained it to me was relationship with God, it's not a fence. I'm not on one side or the other. It's a watering hole. So long as I'm going towards that watering hole, I'm good. So long as I'm seeking the water, so long as I'm looking for the water, that's how I know that I'm on the right path. That's how I know I'm right with God, so long as I am seeking, because I will find. Thank you.